All right, hey everybody. I'm John Segal, Dr. John, and I'm with my good friend here, my best buddy forever, Mandy Norris, and we are Astro Transformation. And so this is our inaugural edition of what we hope will be a long-running series that in which we'll discuss a lot about astrology, upcoming transits, and also history too. There's a lot to cover, and as the old Chinese proverb goes, may you live in interesting times. Well, when we think about it, every time in history is interesting. So, I mean, we could focus on the present, and we will do plenty of that, but we're also going to look back to the past as well. We're going to look over some transits here. And so today we wanted to go over kind of like what's going on in November, like what's up in this current month that we're in. So we've got some key transits coming up. And a lot of what we're going to talk about here are the normal transits that we experience in a month. And so, there's always the lunar cycles that we're dealing with. We're always dealing with the full moon, lunar cycles, new moon, quarter cycles, somewhat. We'll also look a little bit at retrogrades today. So, how about we start off with that? So, our first transit then is really actually just happened as of the time of this video, but on November 5th, the morning of November 5th at 8:19 a.m., we had the full moon, which occurred in Taurus. So the moon right now is opposite the sun. I mean, from our standpoint on Earth, of course, but if you look at an astrological chart or anything like that, you would see the two perfectly opposite each other at the time of the full moon. And so, another way that I like to look at that, Mandy, and we've talked about this a lot, is that every part of the cycle is like a season. It's like the turn of a new season. So the new moon is always the seeding. And like people have done this since time immemorial, like the ancient Mesopotamians and Babylonians, and like everybody that used astrology at some point or another. Farmers Almanac
Mhm.
covers this, right? But you always want to plant things at the new moon because it's like spring. It's like you get to springtime and it's a time to like do your, prep your garden, prep the, area of the field where you're going to plant the seeds and stuff. You don't necessarily plant them like right away, but you get everything ready for that. But you are, in a essence, planting the seeds of the things that you want to grow and that you want to become obviously crops, and then you can harvest the fruit or the wheat or whatever it is that you want to get out of these things, right? But that has to start sometime. And so anytime you want to really, really get something going, you want to source that energy of new beginnings. And that's always the new moon. That's always the springtime of the cycle. And we can get into how that actually applies for a lot of other cycles too. But, the new moon lunar solar cycle is like the one that's really tied in with this the most, and the one probably most relevant to kind of like our daily life, lunar cycles, even though, which by the way, if you ever thought about this, like Mandy, I never thought about this
Mhm.
month. It's really month. It's like it's tied, it's based
Mhm.
upon the moon. So like I don't know if you knew this either. I just found out about this like 47 years after the fact, right? Um Month. Yeah, so it's
And it makes sense
literally
when you say it. Yeah. It's
right because it's like a 29, in our months, some are a little bit longer. We have 31 days, 30 days, February, which is 28 or 29th, but moon takes about 29-ish days to revolve around the earth, but thereabout is considered a moon cycle. And so that's where moon's months come from. So it's just kind of interesting to look at that. Um, but again, the full moon takes place in Taurus at 13 degrees of Taurus, or it just happens. And so, one thing to think about with that, because we always get an opposition. Every month, we're going to have, sometimes in rare cases, you'll have two of these, but the opposition or the new moon or the full moon is the culmination of where you first planted the seeds at. So we had the initial planting of the seed way back in October, and I believe it was around the 19th or the 20th, which was very, very, or the 21st rather, which was very, very late Libra. So whatever you planted around that time is what culminated at this point in time. So we basically went, so think of it like a mini year. Another way to look at the lunar cycle is like a mini year. So we went from, that seed that was planted, the end of the sun being in Libra, 28, 29 degrees. So 2 weeks ago, you did something. I mean, whether you consciously did it or not, you did something. Maybe it was an idea, maybe it was something that you were thinking of. Maybe you decided to buy a car. Maybe you decided, hey, I'm going to have a Halloween party. And so you start planning for that. You went to buy candy. Maybe you put up like a bunch of ghosts and different things in your yard. I have a neighbor here, by the way, who put up Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, and the day of Halloween actually had the Ectomobile, the Ghostbusters vehicle, in their front yard. So they went all out. So yeah, you had that idea, and so you decided to work through it. But maybe, of course, Halloween's now past. You were thinking a little bit further. You're like, hey, I want to do this thing. I think, Mandy, you actually had an idea that you were working on, I think around that time, around 20th, October 20, October 21st. And, I don't know if you want to speak into it, but, you know,
Yeah, now I'm like not remembering because I feel like I always
yeah, you got to think
every
about.
day is a new idea in this world, you know. But
Right,
yeah, I'm
right.
sure I did either like, I'm like, when did I have the idea for I did a workshop last week, you know. I don't remember if that was I feel like that was a month ago or so.
Okay.
But there's
Yeah,
like
yeah.
iterations off of those, off of that and other new thing. I feel like I'm always like, okay, what else can I create? So I feel very confident that that is true, that I did have some idea
I know
around
you
that
did.
time
I
that's
know you
like,
did.
yeah,
Yeah.
coming to
You
fruition or like harvesting, as you're saying.
Yeah, you totally did, I'm sure. But so, and if you don't know, it's okay. Like, I mean, I sometimes have to think about like, what did I do then? So, whether we're conscious of it or not, we can sometimes, when I'm interviewing people, when I do a reading, and you and I will sit down and do readings with people in various, over various things that are coming up in their lives.
Mhm.
But, sometimes we'll say, well, what did you do way back when? And, because they're coming to us because of this thing that happened recently. And so we'll say, okay, well, this is where the pattern began. And it usually is like around a conjunction or a significant aspect between two planets. And like this current event that happened was tied into that thing that happened, a few weeks ago or a few months ago or even a few years ago. And they're like, oh, wow, like, how do you know this? Like,
Yeah.
I'm just reading the chart. Like,
The
that's,
chart.
yeah. I mean, I'm not like brilliant at this. I just read it. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like a language.
I mean,
But
you're brilliant at it, but I
yeah.
think you're not like a fortune teller.
Yeah.
That's
I
what I would say.
mean,
You
right.
are brilliant at reading charts. Are
Well,
you
thank
a
you, Mandy.
fortune teller? No.
Thank you, I know.
I mean, I know you like I know you make those distinctions because it's like important for people to understand. It's like you're not telling,
Right.
you're not telling people what to do or like, that anything is actually going to happen, but you can look forward at what's happening in the sky and like, I mean, we just did that for a client. Remember, like about a month ago, you were like, mark your calendar, something's going to happen on October 19th. And she landed like a really important the career goal of hers and like, reached back out to both of us and was like, oh my God, that thing happened on the 19th. I got the thing. And
Yeah.
it's like,
Which is
ooh.
cool to see. And like, I mean, I think you and I have talked about this a little bit. Like, I feel like even though there's like the kind of intuition that comes, like, I'm always amazed by it. Like, I think, and I only say that as somebody who's been reading this stuff for like years. Like, I mean, I've started really studying astrology like back in my 20s, right? So, but like it never ceases to amaze me. So I do have this like, and so like I do have a research background and all of that, and we both do. So you're like, well, why are you guys into astrology though? And it's just like you sometimes you just have life experiences and like things just there are just things that happen. You see things. It's like, well, how does this work? And so you follow this rabbit hole, and that's basically what we did
Mhm.
to get to this point. And so it's like you're always like fascinated. Like I'm always fascinated. I'm always, Mandy, it never ceases to amaze me when you see these synchronicities that line up. And it's just like, at some point we'll talk about like the bigger transits that are happening next year. And they have historical precedent. They have historical ties to previous similar transits that happened. And it's all so cyclical. It's all based upon these cycles, these big large scale and sometimes shorter scale cycles, which we're talking about now with the sun and moon. But, we can get into like the bigger scale things with like Saturn and Pluto and all these
Mhm.
different things, and we will, of course. But yeah, it's just it's so we take this sort of like detached, like, wow, this is like really like this shouldn't be happening. But it actually is, and it's actually kind of cool to see how it plays out. So, so like I said, it's like astro weather, and you made an excellent point, Mandy. It is like looking at the weather. It's like, you look at the weatherman, the weather lady on TV, and it's like they're saying, well, you have like it's gonna be sunny today, but there's like a 30% chance of showers. So you bring your umbrella to the beach and it never rains. Or, they're like, hey, it's gonna be 90 degrees, not a cloud in the sky. And you get to the beach and you relax, and all of a sudden you hear storm clouds. It's like, oh, really? And you don't come prepared for it. So it's like, okay, well, I guess I'm gonna get soaked. Might as well
Yeah.
jump in the ocean anyway.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so it's really, really cool to look at that. But yeah, going back to the new moon, it is a culmination of the new moon at 28 degrees on October 21st. I have it here in my notes. Um, so think back. We invite you to think back to, what happened around that time. Maybe you consciously did something or unconsciously. And if you consciously did something, you can trace that out over the ensuing weeks.
Mhm.
And I didn't really include this in my notes, but we do have, kind of the checkpoint that happens, which is the quarter cycles of the moon. And so if we go back to October, so again, we had that on November, not November rather, but October, which was the 21st. So going from spring. So if you count the conjunction as the spring of that cycle, we go from spring to summer, which is always the quarter cycle or the square as we know it in astrology because it forms a 90-degree aspect. So you look at them. It's like having one planet at 12 o'clock and one planet at 3 o'clock,
Mhm.
more or less. They keep that position even if they're, if it's like 12:30 or 3:30, but they form this square aspect, and it's always a challenge. It's like a checkpoint. It's like, hey, this idea that you planted, great. Well, now you got to tend to it and make sure that it's going to survive and endure. So you get to summer, seeds are planted, things are growing, but then you have things to worry about like weeds, or maybe rabbits that are wanting to eat your crops or insects, different things like that. So you have to tend to your garden, and if it's a flop, if things don't grow, then you weed them out. You still have time to begin anew, but you also aren't at the same period where you were when it was things were really fertile and it was a good time to get things started. Sometimes you have to cut your losses and you can make up for that, but there's still shifts and things you have to be concerned about because the seasons change. So we go from that, of course, to the full moon, which is a harvest. And that's what we had on November 5th. And so whatever was planted then, consciously or unconsciously, it's come to fruition. We had an election, of course. I mean, obviously, elections don't just start in the United States in like 2 weeks. In some places they do, but these are longer term trends. But even with those, like, this isn't a partisan podcast or anything, but we could also say, hey, look, maybe some of the candidates that participated in the elections, maybe they did an event, 2 weeks before the election itself. There's this really like last push to, get your message out to voters and on. So maybe, those that celebrate the victory that took place that they maybe earned last night, that they can see, hey, we planted this kind of like seed for this final push that we did on October 21st, starting around that time, and it culminated with, a beautiful election night victory or not. Maybe it was a loss. But regardless, it's just something to look at on that scale.
What what are the practical things that people can do with the like if they planted the seeds consciously or unconsciously in October and now we're at harvest today because today's the 5th when we're recording this, what can people do with whatever they've harvested with their harvest, right? I mean, I guess there's like, what are some things they could do? They could like feast, they could conserve, right? Like they could, like, I'm thinking about it in terms of fruits and vegetables, like they could can it, they could freeze it, they could, conserve it. Like they're a way to conserve to get them through to the next harvest, or not really, because they can plant new seeds in the new moon.
Yeah, it's a very good question, Mandy. So yeah, there is like I mean if we take it literally and maybe I'm like making it too literal, like obviously, like any time is a good time. Like there are just sometimes some things you just have to do and you have to do them anytime. Like even when there's a Mercury retrograde going on, which, we're in right now or about to be in, but the literal approach is, if I say this or if I state this literally, then it is like, hey, you want to follow the energy patterns, and there's certain times when you don't do things. But also we're in the modern world, and I mean, if you have a greenhouse or you have enough space and the right conditions, you can plant crops year round. I mean, you also have to tend to things like lighting and temperatures and things like that. So you can always do different things at different times. But there is an ideal time to do things though. And so if you follow the energetic patterns of like, setting intentions and, following the patterns of the moon and sun, then you will find sometimes will be more conducive to building things. And that energy has, a beginning, it culminates, then, it goes into more of the dissipation phase. And so after the harvest, of course, which is fall, we get into winter. And so, it's like when fall arrives in the world, which we're in right now, I mean, for the most part, we're not planting any new things out there in the fields. I mean, it's getting colder, the days are getting shorter, conditions just aren't great anymore. And so, there comes a time when you really have to you get the harvest of your labors. You get the harvest of the things that you did during the course of the year, and there's not really much else you can do. But just kind of tend to that, collect what you can, harvest what you can, cut your losses, and prepare for the winter. And so, in each of our lives, we also have these patterns that show up. There are times when we're in this like building phase. And, I had to cite Tony Robbins because I know he talks about this and a lot of other people do, and we will. Mandy and I both did a lot of like this transformative leadership development works too, which we bring into, our talks here. But, there is like this season of your life where you're getting everything started, you're going for it, like, you're in this like, okay, I have this big vision, I have this big plan, I'm pushing, I'm going to go for it, I'm going to go for it, I'm going to do these things. And so it's like that big push that happens in early spring, when we get around like March 19th or 20th, and you're like, energy
Yeah.
always shifts around that time because it's
Mhm.
like, okay, all the green energy is coming up from the ground, the shoots are going up in the air, the birds are flying around, all of a sudden there's all these insects and bees and different things like that in the air, and it's like life comes roaring back. And so that's a new beginning. And so we go through that phase, and then from spring to summer, the culmination. We've all had these times in our life, and maybe we're going through them now, or we will, or we're just coming out of one. We have this sort of like achievement. Like you've done the work, and hopefully you're seeing the rewards for that. Hopefully it is the recognition for like the job you've done, the project that you've completed. You've worked hard, you've been on the career track, or you've been a successful parent, and now your kids are graduating from high school, they're going off to college, and hopefully Mandy's like, no, 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 I don't want to think about that yet. Not yet. So she's not quite there with her
Not quite,
kids and
but I
her
had that
family.
conversation just before
Yeah.
we jumped on about like, oh my gosh, the importance of having your own things because, I feel like most people don't want their kids to leave the nest, but like when they do, it's like they do, and like, then you got to have your own things. So
It's a
not
natural
there
part
yet.
of life. Yeah.
Right.
It's a
But
natural part
it's
of life.
on my mind.
Yeah. So
What's
Mandy's still so yeah, and that's actually a perfect lead in, Mandy. So to use that as an example, like so Mandy's in the summer phase of her life. I mean, because of her kids, like, they're both moving into their teens. I'm sorry, but
teens? They both are
yeah.
teens.
Yeah, yeah, I know. Well, I'm trying to help you out here, buddy, but also like, yeah, but this is summer, this is summer and as far
Yeah,
as you being a mother, right? And, being a
yeah.
parent, but eventually you're going to get to that harvest where your kids leave and you become an empty nester. And then it's like, okay, well, now what do I do? And so we can relate that to this change of the seasons. And again, bring it back to the full moon. It's like there is this like, okay, I'm up at the top of the hill. Now where do I go? I'm looking out And yeah, there is this tendency to say, well, okay, I got to climb down the hill. And the energy does have this sort of waning vibe about it where I've done this, but like, but it also can be like it can also show up as like an execution of plans, things that you've been working on up to this point, and you get to the point where you recognize that you've achieved, what you want, you built what you wanted to build, or you've built the plan, and you're ready to launch it and let go of it. And so you're dispersing that energy. You're putting it out there. You're doing the things. But it's like an unraveling. Now you've all the stuff that you built. Now you're kind of like stepping back and letting it go and letting it unfold. And you're tending to it, of course, or maybe you're not. But, that role changes for you. And so, you are going to get to a point, as a parent, of course, where, your kids are going to go off on their own and like they're always going to be your kids. You're always going to be their mom, but like this is going to be the result of your parenting, that you see out in the world, and hopefully you've instilled in them the proper values and ideals and way to kind of cope and deal with things out in the world to move forward. And you can start to like recognize that, so that will be the autumn of your life as a parent, not not the autumn of your life, but also like, yeah, the harvest, and then you go into winter, which we don't have to get into. And I mean,
It's dark,
let's
it's depressing.
yeah, let's not mince words. Like, I know winter has such a negative connotation to it, but like we also get to be realistic too. Winter is, I would say that when you think of winter, you think of the end of life. You think of, okay, we're getting old and all. And so we all have that. We're all going to have that
Well, I'm
phase,
not getting old.
Yeah. No,
They're
you're not
getting
getting old.
old.
I
I
know. You see all this gray hair here, gray hair here, Fancy. No, but like,
there's a few up there. I
yeah,
understand what you're saying. I'm just making
I
a mood
know,
out
I
of
know. But there are natural cycles to life, though. But that's life itself, and we don't have to get in all the metaphysical parts of that, but also like even people who are in their 70s and 80s can be like seeing a spring, like even
yeah.
if it's not physically you're seeing a spring, in other ways, spiritually, or as you connect with other aspects of your life, you make shifts and changes, and so that's going to continue to happen. There's going to be multiple seasons of our lives, multiple of these wheels, let's say, playing out in, various aspects of our lives. So and I think just looking at the astrological aspects, that just demonstrates that, we're all going through these various phases. For all of us, at some point in our lives, we're going to have winter. We're going to have multiple winters going on. Other parts of our lives, we may have a spring, I mean, you go through this thing like, you may have kids leaving the house, then you start a new relationship. Well, that's a spring, right? I mean, you're in this autumn, this harvest period. If you split up, if you're not with anybody, whatever, you start something new, you start a new venture, you decide to move, sell off the house, go off to
Yeah.
another part of the world. That's a spring. It's a new beginning. It's a new adventure. So maybe I belabor the point, but yeah, but that's also like I want to share that though because it is how I look at things though that we have this in Western society. We are so painfully linear. We think
Mhm.
about things, it has to be this way, straight. And if you deviate from that, there's something wrong with you. But, Eastern societies, Eastern civilizations, and in many ways, many ancient cultures saw things as a circle, the circle of life. And it's this
Mhm.
constant cycle of birth, life, renewal, birth, death, decline, death again, renewal, however we want to say it, in whatever order, though. But birth, life, decline, sickness, death, harvest, renewal, and it just repeats itself. And, there's this constant thing going on. So I think it helps to look at that. But it's written in the stars, literally.
Mhm.
Thank you for watching. Please click subscribe below and follow us. Welcome to our community.